It happened 5 years ago, and I still can't sleep right because of it. I worked at KFC for over 12 years, and this is my story. Back then, I loved working at KFC. The smell of the chicken, the chatting customers, everything about it made me happy. I was even going to be promoted to manager. The manager at the time called me to his office one Thursday and said, "Remember, being a manager comes with a lot of new responsibilities. I hope you can handle it the way I have all these years." "I'm fully capable, sir." "I know I can do it," I replied with a smile. He looked at me with a strange, dark expression and said, "I really hope you are." During my last week as a normal employee, I worked the night shifts. There was a chubby kid named Timmy who always came to the restaurant. He stayed there all day until late at night. I later found out he hated going home because his parents fought all the time. He said, "My mom and dad are always fighting. They don't care about me, so I come here." I felt sorry for the kid, so after my shift, I'd keep him company. He always licked his fingers after eating, and it reminded me of the KFC slogan, "It's finger-licking good." I'd serve him and say, "It's so good, you lick your fingers." One night during my second shift, a man came in wearing a hoodie. I couldn't see his face, but he had a bad aura and made the place feel tense. He ordered a bucket of chicken. I served him, and he said in a low voice, "Are these the finger-licking good ones?" "Yeah, man, I guess so," I replied, feeling uneasy. "Yeah, sure, these are the finger-licking good ones. I don't need any other ones but those," he said, staring into space as he began to eat. I was creeped out but tried to stay calm. The man came back the next night, ordered the same thing, and left silently after eating. This went on for a few nights. On the last night before I was to become manager, I went out to throw out the trash. When I came back, Timmy and the man were gone. I didn't see anyone leave, and I got scared. Then I heard sounds coming from the kitchen. I waited a few minutes before deciding to check it out. When I reached the kitchen, I saw the man at the grill, whistling a tune. "What are you doing here? Where's the cook?" I asked. "His shift is over, so it's my turn," he replied confidently. "You don't work here. Customers aren't allowed back here." "You have to leave," I said, trying to stay calm. He ignored me and continued cooking. I didn't know what to do. As I was thinking, I saw him take a jar from his pocket and start adding what looked like fries dipped in ketchup into the deep fryer. But when I looked closer, I realized he was dropping bloody human fingers into the fryer. I began to back away to call the police, but I tripped over something. It was Timmy's body, lying on the floor with his fingers cut off. I screamed, the sight shaking me to my core. The manager rushed in, and I said, "Thank God you're here. Please get help. This man killed this child." "SHH, you don't want to alert anyone now, do you, John?" the manager said, putting a finger to his lips. He walked over to the hooded man and said, "Mr. Cornelius here is just our night chef." The man took off his hoodie, revealing a face covered in scars. "Are you feeding our customers human fingers?" I asked, horrified. "No, you see, John, the way fine wine adds a divine taste to dishes is the same way seasoned human fingers add to the taste of chicken. It's like that special spice. Believe me, you won't understand until you've tried a fresh one from the batch," the manager explained. The cook offered me a wing to taste. I was frozen, contemplating whether to scream and run. The manager said, "These are the new responsibilities that come with being a manager. I was once in your position, John. Remember, you said you were ready for it." There was a sick voice at the back of my head telling me to do it. I wanted to be the manager so badly that I was willing to keep this horrible secret. So, I took the wing and ate it. It tasted sweet and better than anything I had before. I went on to be the manager for 5 years, ignoring all the missing people posts. I knew what happened to them. Even after all this time, I see Timmy's face every night. I'm not telling this story for forgiveness or remorse. I'm telling it because I hope sharing it will give me the peace I so desperately need. That night changed everything for me. The horror of what I became a part of still haunts me. Every day, I live with the guilt and the fear that one day, the truth will come out. So friends, please subscribe to the Tales of Terror, as only a few of you did, or maybe you will face this situation as I did. It all started when I decided to visit my parents, who lived across the state. I hadn't seen them in over a year, so I was eager to get there. I left early in the morning, planning to drive straight through, only stopping for gas. By about 2 in the afternoon, I was starving. I needed to stop and get something to eat. I spotted a KFC in the middle of nowhere and decided to pull in. I probably should have used the drive-thru, but I had promised my girlfriend I wouldn't eat in her car. So, I parked and went inside. The place was almost empty, except for an older woman at the counter. She smiled at me warmly, like she hadn't seen a customer in hours. She seemed sweet and harmless. I ordered a Pepsi and some chicken nuggets. "Back in a sec," she said, and disappeared into the back. I sat down at a booth, looking out at the cornfields across the highway. Storm clouds were rolling in, and I hoped I wouldn't have to drive through the rain. Suddenly, a black limo pulled into the parking lot. I couldn't believe my eyes, a limo in the middle of nowhere, stopping at a KFC. A woman in a beautiful wedding dress got out of the driver's seat. She looked stunning but also very sad, with mascara smeared from crying. She walked straight into the restaurant and headed towards me. I was the only customer there, so it was hard not to stare. "Can I join you?" she asked, her voice soft but strained. Sure," I said, still in shock. She sat down, and we introduced ourselves. Her name was Mandy. There was an awkward silence for a few seconds. Then she looked at me with tear-filled eyes and asked, "Am I hideous?" "No, you look great," I replied, genuinely meaning it despite the smeared makeup and messy hair. She was beautiful. "Are you attracted to me?" she asked suddenly. I was sipping my Pepsi at the time and almost choked. Yes, you're very attractive," I stammered, trying to be polite. She smiled, but there was something off about her smile. It sent a chill down my spine. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. I noticed red stains on her white gloves. My heart started racing. "Let's run away together, Tom," she said, her grip tightening on my hand. I tried to pull my hand away, but she held on tight. "I need to get something from my car," I lied. "I'll be right back." "I'll come with you," she said, not letting go. As we walked out, I saw the limo's front fender was caved in and smeared with blood. Mandy saw me looking and said, "That's what's left of our best man." I caught him kissing James behind the church. My mind raced with fear. I knew I had to get away. "You deserve better than him, Mandy." "Wait here while I get my hand sanitizer from the car," I said, trying to act casual. I walked to my car, heart pounding. As I got in and locked the door, Mandy ran up and started pounding on the window. "You're leaving me too," she screamed, her face twisted with rage. I started the car, but she yanked the door open and punched me in the face. My keys flew out of my hand. She lunged at me, trying to choke me. Just then, I heard a loud bang, and Mandy froze. Blood started pouring from her stomach, staining her wedding dress. The old woman from the KFC stood behind her, holding a shotgun. "Get back inside, hon," she said with a calm smile. "We need to call the police." I was in shock but managed to say, "Thank you." I followed the woman inside, and she handed me the tray of chicken nuggets I'd ordered. She smiled and said, "You never got to eat your nuggets, did you?" I sat there in a daze, eating the nuggets, while she called the police. When the police arrived, they took Mandy away, and I gave my statement. It turned out she had been left at the altar and had a mental breakdown. She ran over the best man in the limo and had been driving around aimlessly until she found me. That day still haunts me. Every time I see a wedding dress or a limo, I remember Mandy's crazed eyes and the blood on her gloves. It was the most terrifying experience of my life, and I hope I never go through anything like it again. But guys, have you ever faced a situation like this? Please let me know in the comments. It was a few years ago when I worked the night shift at KFC. I was a cashier, and it was usually quiet at night. But one night, everything changed, and it's an experience I can't forget. It was late, almost closing time. I was sitting behind the counter, counting the cash. The entrance door suddenly flew open, and two boys walked in. One had red hair and a pale face, while the other had dirty, long hair tied in a bun. They looked about 15 or 16 years old and had an unclean look. Their clothes were dirty, and I could see grime under their fingernails. A bad smell filled the air as they approached the counter. The red-haired boy stepped forward and said, "A bucket of fried chicken, please," in a cold, emotionless voice. He handed me a $20 bill. I told them to take a seat and went to the back to tell Ralph, our night cook, about the order. "Ralph, those boys look really sketchy," I said. Ralph laughed. "Don't worry, John. They're just kids. Keep an eye on them, and I'll get the chicken ready." I went back to the front and saw the boys wandering around the restaurant, looking at everything. The red-haired boy, Jackson, seemed very interested in the security camera. The other boy, Liam, was quieter and kept staring at me with a creepy smile. He had scars on his face and kept licking his lips while looking at me. It made me really uneasy. Suddenly, Liam got up and left the restaurant. My heart skipped a beat. I asked Jackson, "Where did your friend go?" "To take a leak," Jackson replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I tried to stay calm and said, "All right, our cook will bring the food soon." After a few minutes, Liam came back and sat down. I waited and waited, but Ralph didn't come out with the food. My patience ran out, and I went to the kitchen to check on him. As soon as I stepped into the kitchen, the lights went out. It wasn't a power outage because the street lights outside were still on. Someone had turned off the power switch. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight. As I took a step forward, I felt something wet and sticky under my foot. It smelled metallic. I pointed the flashlight at the floor and saw a pool of blood. Ralph was lying there with a deep stab wound. He was dead. I turned to run and came face to face with Jackson. He was holding a bloody knife and smiling at me. I remembered the back door and ran towards it, but Liam blocked my way. These boys had killed Ralph and now had me cornered. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear. "Look, Liam, he's willing to give us what we want," Jackson said, laughing like a maniac. "Let's go to the counter," he ordered, waving the knife at me. I tried to stay calm because one wrong move could mean my life. They escorted me back to the front, and Liam pushed me so hard that I tripped and hit my head on the counter. Blood ran down my face, and I started crying in pain. "Just tell me what you want. Please, let me go," I begged. "We just want the money from the cash register," Jackson said. "Don't try anything funny, or you'll regret it." I had an idea. The cash register is automated. I need to access the computer to open it, I lied. Jackson glared at me. "I hope you're not trying to be smart, because I'll cut your throat and dump your head in the fryer," he threatened. They whispered to each other for a few seconds, then Liam went to the kitchen to turn the power back on. As soon as the lights came back, Jackson ordered, "Turn off the security camera." I pretended to turn off the camera while actually leaving it on. I opened the cash register and started putting the money in a bag. When Jackson came close to take the bag, I grabbed his head and slammed it against the counter. The impact was so hard that he didn't even have time to scream. Blood and flesh poured out of his wound. I took my phone from his hand but didn't call 911 yet. Liam saw what happened and ran towards the exit. I was ready for him. As he passed by the counter, I threw chili flakes in his face. He screamed in pain and fell to the floor. I ran over, grabbed the knife from his hand, and stabbed him. I cleaned up the mess, wrapped their bodies in garbage bags, and hid them in the basement incinerator. I called 911 and reported a robbery. The police came and believed my story. They saw the security footage of the boys entering the restaurant and identified them as escaped criminals with a history of burglary. The next day, I went back and burned their bodies. Only I had access to the basement, so my secret stayed safe. I continued working there for a month or two before leaving for a fresh start. The boys are still on the wanted list, and everyone thinks I'm a victim. But in reality, I got away with murder. Even now, I can't forget that night. It haunts me, and sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. But deep down, I know I had no choice. It was either them or me. It happened a few years ago when I was working the night shift at KFC. It was a quiet, rainy night, and I thought it would be just another uneventful shift. I was wrong. The rain had been pouring for hours, making everything outside look dreary and bleak. I was behind the counter, trying to stay awake, lost in my thoughts. My coworker, Josh, had been in the back for a while, doing who knows what. I called out to him, but there was no response. I figured he was just taking his time. I was staring out the window at the empty parking lot when I saw a black sedan slowly drive in. It didn't park in the usual spots, but pulled right up to the door. My gut told me something was off. I got up and moved to the front to get a better look. The rain was heavy, and I could barely see the driver. The door opened, and a girl with red hair stepped out. She was soaked, even though she had been in the car. She looked at the ground, not making eye contact. Then, the driver's side door opened, and a big man got out. He was a huge guy, with a stern look on his face. "Adam, you can't park there," I called out, trying to sound authoritative. The man ignored me, his face hardening as he looked at me. He reached into his coat and pulled out the longest, sharpest knife I had ever seen. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm going to kill you," he said, calmly and coldly. His words sent a shiver down my spine. There was no emotion, just a promise of what was to come. He walked towards me, his knife gleaming in the rain. "First, you're going to make us something to eat," he said, just as calmly. He grabbed the redhead by her hair and slashed through it with his knife, tossing her severed ponytail to the ground. I was terrified, but I tried to keep my composure. I turned and walked back into the restaurant, the man following closely behind me. My mind raced. Where was Josh? I hoped he was still in the back, unaware of what was happening. I moved behind the counter and started preparing some food, my hands shaking. The man stood there, watching me with those cold eyes. "Be quick about it," he said, his voice sending chills down my spine. I tried to move faster, but my fear made me clumsy. I dropped the spatula, and the man's expression turned angry. He walked around the counter and nudged me violently with his elbow. I fell to the floor, my heart pounding. As I tried to get up, I saw Josh standing at the door, a Rubik's Cube in his hand. He had a look of shock on his face. Without a word, Josh charged at the man and struck him in the back of the head with the Rubik's Cube. The man fell forward, his head hitting the glass display with a loud thud. Just then, police sirens blared outside. 2 cops burst into the restaurant, guns drawn. The redhead girl ran over to us, crying. "He's over here," Josh shouted to the cops. They quickly subdued the man, who was still unconscious on the floor. "Are you okay?" Josh asked, helping me up. I nodded, still in shock. I was just glad to be alive. The police took our statements and escorted the man out in handcuffs. They told us he was a wanted criminal who had been on the run. The girl, it turned out, was a runaway who had been picked up by the man on the highway. That night, I realized how close I came to losing my life. I still have nightmares about that man and his cold, emotionless eyes. Every time it rains, I remember that night and the terror I felt. I'm just grateful to Josh for his quick thinking and bravery. Without him, I might not be here to tell this story. Scared yet? Please also click on the bell icon after subscribing to watch some of the scariest real-life experiences with us. Until then, click on the left video to continue your scariest stories journey, or else you can jump on the right video too.